We got it. We got it. We got it. Do we have it? I think we have it. I really think we do. It said it's waiting. It's connecting. There you are. Man, I'm telling you, every single time I try to do this, there is something. Something goes wrong with this. So,
technology is not my friend, man.
I'm glad that we have you here. That's all that matters. You are here. We're talking.
Can I do this?
I don't think it'll do it.
Why is my thing weird like that? Who knows?
Yeah.
Well,
you can only.
I'm glad to be here.
Vertical. So awesome. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh man, thanks for having me.
Very much.
Honest Youth Pastor, you guys, is a legend.
I don't know about a legend.
He is a legend in the memosphere.
Pot stir, perhaps, controversial. I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of names, I'm sure.
I love it.
Legend may not be one. So anyway, thank you for hopping on. Obviously, there's a lot of questions that people have sent in. I saw if anybody wants to ask questions, don't do it in the comment section. There's a little questionnaire you can fill out and send them in. So this isn't one of the questions that I have that I sent you, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there may be a couple people, if they don't know who you are, just could you explain your account a little bit and kind of what you do with it?
So my name's Brian. I'm a worship pastor, and I'm in year 26 in worship ministry. And so, love the Lord, love the church, committed to the church. But, there are those times where people say things, they write things, whatever. So about 3 years ago, I'm walking through the church on a Sunday, and that happened. Somebody said something I don't remember what it was, but it just sort of stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, I need some sort of therapeutic outlet. I need to get this off my chest somewhere, maybe where nobody knows who I am. And so I started this meme account. It was in July of 2016, and nobody noticed. I felt a little bit better. I just started posting about real life stuff, real life things that people had said to me or stuff that I'd lived through or whatever in ministry. And then after a little while, people started to notice, and I started to get some blue check mark people, and that was when it kind of started getting real for me. And I was like, oh man, people are noticing. There's responsibility that comes with this. Yeah, exactly. So so my wife knew, and almost nobody else knew, just a few people knew. And so I serve on the advisory board for the Experience Conference, which is a conference for worship leaders and production people that happens in Orlando every September. And so I was sitting next to this guy named Jeremy at a dinner at one of our retreats, and I just felt compelled to get it off my chest.
You needed to share.
I did. I was like, I said, okay, have you ever seen this Instagram account called Worship Leader Props? And he was like, oh yeah, I have. I follow it. And I was like, well, it's me. And he was like, it is not. And that was usually the reaction. Cause I'm a quiet guy. I'm a little more on the low key side. So I showed him my phone, and he was like, no way, you need to do a podcast. I said, I don't know anything about podcasts. And he said, I do. And so that's kind of what has led us to where we are now.
Gotcha. So if any of you are watching or rewatching this or ever see this ever, you have to go check out the Worship Leader Props podcast. I will plug you till kingdom come, my friend, because literally, everybody probably knows that's why was my account at all. I know zero about music. Can't sing, can't play instruments, don't know nothing at all, nothing. And that your guys' podcast is informational, not just for production people or worship. I can listen to it and be like, oh, that's interesting. That's something I can take from that. It's very, it's so balanced. It's got, there's some parts where you're just rolling. I'm driving my truck for work, and man, I'm just cracking up going down the highway listening to your guys' podcast. And then thanks, you just come in with the left hook and be like, oh, here's some seriousness now. And you're like, Okay, cool. I mean, it's so rich. So I just want to plug that. Thank you guys for doing that. It's so good.
Thank you very much.
Um,
Thank you so much.
so, so on that, obviously, a lot of this is going to be geared toward worship leaders, worship pastors, that side of it. And I'm super intrigued by it because, like I just said, I know nothing about it. Like, I know some worship guys, and we're just like, okay, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. I don't know nothing about playing a guitar. But so that kind of brings me to my first kind of question for you. We'll kind of build off and see where this goes. I mean, it's not going to be necessarily like, I just like to see how it flows. It's why we do it live. So as far as worship, obviously, I think for any church, no matter kind of what types of music they sing, it's a big part of the service. I mean, it really gears your heart, gets you ready for, I mean, it's just a big part. And there's some people that like, that's the biggest part for them is that worship. So as far as that goes, what's the most important element as far as what you would consider on a Sunday morning when you do worship, knowing that there's going to be people out there that are just such a wide variety of beliefs? I mean, how do you approach that knowing that you're going to have such a mix of people out there?
I think so. This is for you. So I'm on the older end of the scale for worship leaders, and so for years, if I would talk to a college student or whatever, and they would ask me a question like that, how do you, where do you start? How do you start? And I was like, okay, I think there are three things, and if you do these three things, I think that you're going to be on the right track. You're going to get a good start. Number one, you got to know the way, and you have to have a healthy, living, vibrant relationship with Jesus. What you're doing on the platform is an overflow, and so you got to know the way. The second one is you got to lead the way. You got to lead the people, and that starts with your planning and all the meetings you sit through and all those things. You've got to craft and lead them in an experience where they can have an encounter with Jesus, right? So you've got to know the way, you've got to lead the way or point the way, and then you got to get out of the way and just let God do what he's going to do. So much of what we do now is there's lots of produced elements and lighting and broadcasts and all of those things going on, and those are all necessary. Those all allow us to share the gospel with a broader audience, a lot more people. But I think if you do those three things, if your worship service, if you're at the helm, like if you're a senior pastor, a worship pastor, a production person, if you're a person who's in the room when those important decisions are made, really what happens in your services just needs to be an overflow of what happens in private. That's my.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is maybe it's just the lens I'm viewing it through, but really it's a lot like maybe even a pastor preparing his sermon. I mean, really it's just walking people through, I mean, to show and to, just to demonstrate, to point them toward Jesus with the hope of, I mean, you might not know where they're at, but that's the whole purpose of it, is kind of gear them toward that direction.
That's been my approach, for my time in ministry, for sure.
Awesome. So you've been in, you said 20, how many years? 20? Wow. All right. So
yeah.
In all of those years, so obviously you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, you've learned a lot. What are some of the non-negotiable things when it comes to worship? I mean, what do you hold with a close fist and say this is definitely what we're doing, opposed to where there's some things you might approach with more of an open hand and say I'm a little more lenient with that? What are those two categories?
I think content is so important, and I think developing a lens to choose the content is equally important. We have a lot of people pushing things at us, Christian radio and internet accounts and all kinds of Grippo's in the office. Jeremy right there. Grippo's in the office. That goes a long way. But I think, man, we are, I have a good friend who says it this way: we are putting theology on the lips of our people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that is not something that we should enter into lightly. And so the content, the theology of what we're singing, we're communicating all of those things. And so the content and the filter or the lens to choose that content, those are non-negotiables for me. And then I think beyond that, there are some other things like, man, I'm an older guy. I think a lot of our songs are super high right now. Like, that's kind of a popular thing. A lot of male worship leaders who are, like first tenors. I mean, dude, no one's going to walk in, and very few people are going to walk in at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning and, scream high G's and A's. And so, I think then we slide into some other things.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know your congregation. What fits at your church may not work with my group of people.
Yeah.
You got to know your congregation. But man, that first one for me, that the absolute non-negotiable is be careful. Hold everything up to the word. Yeah.
Gotcha. So to play on that a little bit, so just kind of a follow-up on there. So not to get super specific, because I don't want to do that and put you against the wall or anything. But I've had somebody on here before just to reference, and they said, no, they're not a worship leader or worship pastor or anything like that, but they specifically said that churches should not sing X or X from these certain worship bands because of the theology behind it. Is that kind of what you're saying? Or what you're saying is, let's hold up it song by song and not be so dogmatic about it, but just song by song and lyric by lyric held it up against the word?
My approach is the song by song,
mm-hmm.
because I will say there are some of the big worship bands that we happen to know some things about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but there are a lot of songwriters out there, and we don't know a lot about most of them.
Yeah. And
so I think you have to hold the theology of the song up next to the Word of God.
Gotcha, yeah.
And if that stands, that is usually where I land, unless we find out there is something, really bizarre going on.
Gotcha. No, I just to be open about it, I mean, that's where I would stand on it, because like you said, I mean, there's some people that I would disagree with theologically, but have put out some songs that are just like, that's pretty good. Like, so it's hard to distinguish there between the two and be like, well, I'm just going to throw all of it out.
There are some people that may put out good songs, and we just don't, we don't sit in a corner and watch them throughout the day, and we don't have access to their lives and know, we just don't have the luxury of knowing.
Yeah. Gotcha. So bigger question here, more of a general question, but let's say you could sit down, because I know lots of times, depending on the church dynamic, size, all that stuff, some, especially I think in smaller ones, pastors and their worship leaders, maybe, like I said, even listening to your podcast, I don't know a whole lot about worship, so when I listen to it, it's very helpful to me, but sometimes maybe that dynamic's not there, or there's just something missing. So what advice would you give if you had a room full of pastors and you were like, hey, here's some advice about, communicating with your worship leader, working alongside your worship leader, teaming that up? Because obviously it's going to be more effective other than just a pastor saying, hey, get up there and sing some songs and then I'll get up and do my thing. What would be some advice you would give to pastors if you had the opportunity to talk to their worship leader?
Say to senior pastors, I would say, I don't think there's any mantle that is as heavy as the senior leader, the senior pastor mantle. I think that is in a league of its own. But I think the mantle of worship pastor or worship leader is also something that is, it's a calling. It's serious. This is a person who, let's say your sermon is 35 minutes long and your worship set is 20 or 25 minutes long. I mean, this is somebody who is leading your congregation, in front of your congregation,
Mm-hmm.
almost as much as you are. And so, man, pour into them. Don't leave them out on an island by themselves. You know, they gosh, this, I don't mean, the worship pastor probably is going to have less insulation than the senior pastor is
Mm-hmm.
in many instances. And so I would say pour into them, develop the relationship. You know, those two people need to work at their relationship, because their congregation, if it's messed up, the congregation is going to sense that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's going to be reflective. And so I would say work at the relationship. That's huge.
Yeah, gotcha. Awesome. All right, so there's one last question before we get into the questions that people have submitted and maybe try to build off those and have the conversation. But I always like to try to ask people this because it's very interesting to me, everyone's responses, because everyone that I've had on live so far that I've asked this question to, nobody has the same response. And it's just such an interesting question to me because everybody is from different areas. I mean, you're from a different area than I am. I mean, it's just all of it's different. So from your perspective, and I know this is a large question, but what do you think is the biggest issue facing Christianity right now?
Man, okay, this is my perspective. Authenticity. Authenticity is just huge. You know, we spend so much time making noise over the things that we're against. I think we should spend more times talking about what we're for.
Gotcha. Short and concise.
That's my 2 cents. Yeah, I mean,
You like it? You're good. It doesn't have. I mean, that's good. It doesn't have to be deep, like a long, drawn out thing. Yeah. Just people, instead of yelling, try to bring people together. So I mean, really,
absolutely. I mean, Jesus, we have the greatest story ever told, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so often it gets lost with us, you know, screaming, "You're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're wrong," and you know, man, I heard a pastor say, you can't clean the fish before you catch them.
It's a good analogy. Yeah. Gotcha. One of the reasons I love your guys' account and just your all's hearts is that it brings balance to the rest of us that are a little crazy. So, I mean,
don't look at us for balance, man. Don't look at us for balance.
A little balance. Your hearts are so geared in that direction of the church and loving the church. I mean, as far as the body and just bringing, I mean, that's something that just watching your guys' account, just as it's grown, has really been this transformation. That's just really encouraging. I think that's really just so much of the appeal is just your guys' desire to grow the body in such a way to bring people, not just production people and worship pastors, but everyone to this, you know, to have kind of what you guys have on this the podcast, which is this balance of humor and seriousness and pointing people toward Jesus. So
I appreciate that.
Not to pat you on the back and keep blowing smoke, but it's true, man. So,
well, hey, look, we look at you as like a big brother. You've been doing this way longer than we have, and you're a great model for us because you're several steps ahead of us. You're running faster than we are, and that's one of the things we share with people. You want to get better, find somebody who's better than you are and run with them, you know. And so we love watching you because you use humor. Humor just unlocks the door to the deeper issues that you're trying to get to, and that's kind of what we're doing too. So we love watching you.
The other day I found out I've been doing this 6 years, and that was mind-blowing because it wasn't supposed to be 6 years. It was supposed to be much like yours, getting on here and venting and being done and getting off, and for some reason we still going. So
well, I'm glad you're still going.
All right, so let's get a couple questions up here. Okay, sorry. Here's one. It is, what is the biggest issue facing worship leaders today?
Jeez, man. This is this is going to be another, it's going to sound like I'm oversimplifying, but man, more than you love the music or the artist or the lights or whatever, man. Just uh, allowing all of that other stuff to get out of the way, and allowing the overflow of your relationship with Jesus to come through in your leadership. I think that's huge. You know, we take a lot, like our whole account is based on, you know, knuckleheaded stuff that people say to you or write to you or whatever. And when that happens, I think it can close you off. It can close a certain part of you off. And that's one of the things that we try to do with our podcast is that, okay, let's take some time to laugh. Like, hey, you think you got it bad? Listen to what somebody wrote to this other person. And so, you know, once we can laugh about it and realize we're not alone, we're all in this together, then let's have a conversation about how we move forward, and how, in spite of all of these voices that are coming at us, how do we lead from a place of authenticity. And so, man, I think the biggest thing for worship leaders is just, you know, allowing all that other noise to just get out of the way, and just lead from an overflow of your relationship with Jesus.
Well, I think that's good advice for anybody going into ministry. I know you guys get a lot of DMs. I get a lot of DMs about youth ministry and youth pastors and things like that. And that's what I try to tell people is, it's like, okay, first off, this is not going to be easy for you. Like, you are going to constantly, it will force you, it'll either kill you or force you to get thick skin, because you're going to have to, there's going to be comments and things that come after you. You're just going to have to let go, or make an Instagram account and vent about it.
That's right, man. Well, and here's the deal. Like if it's not a calling, run. Run in the other direction, because it doesn't matter. Like, I'm super blessed, and I've also been through a lot of stuff that that God has used in my life that led me to where I am today. And so I'm in a very great church, great situation. I love my pastor. I'm in a good spot. But man, there are a lot of people out there who deal with all kinds of craziness, man. And there will be days, no matter where you are or what you're doing in ministry, there will be days where the only thing you have to fall back on is that calling.
Yeah, and that's the advice. I mean, I got that advice before I went into ministry, and I've given that advice. It's probably some of the best advice I've got, is that if you are not called, do anything else. Because go sell tomatoes on the side of the road, do something, because you're not going to make it. Like, it'll destroy you. I mean, it'll crush you, because people, like you said, people can be very not kind with their words towards you about stuff that I mean, there's times, and I'm sure you've got, I know I've heard a few of those on your podcast, but there's been times where I get done preaching a sermon and somebody's just like, that was wrong. And I'm like, we're going to agree to disagree on it. I mean, if you want to talk about it, we can, but if you're just going to come at me, like, we're done. So, and you got to know that that's going to happen. Like, that you're going to have those. Not everyone's going to be like, you're the greatest person in the world.
Yeah, be suspicious if that starts happening all the time. I mean, because now, like, totally different from when I started. You've got Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and, you know, whatever is next. I'm sure I'm leaving a bunch of them out, but whatever's next, and, you know, they've got all kinds of ways to come at you now.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's see what else we got here. Oh, no, that wasn't supposed to. Hold on. All right, so let's look here. Let me see here. I don't see that whole question. I'm a worshiper, and it's hard for me to minister to people. How do I do that? Maybe it's meant to say I'm a worship pastor, and it's hard for me to minister to people. How do I do that? We're going to assume that's the question.
That's difficult, because when the people are there, so often we are actively engaged in our ministry, which kind of a lot of times prohibits us from the one-on-one stuff. But there are ways to do it, I try. I don't always win this, but I try to kind of work the room before church starts. We have 4 weekend services, so it gives me a lot of chance to get around and shake hands and talk to people. That allows you to know people. I mean, we just shared this on the podcast. A pastor friend of mine said something to me that I'd never heard before. Shepherds smell like sheep.
Yeah, you're in and among the people. Yeah.
Yeah, being with your people, knowing them, certainly one-on-one, like in our church, certainly I'm a pastor to the entire congregation, but also to my area and the people who volunteer in my ministry, in music, production, all those things, I'm the guy they look to as the pastor. And so, yeah, man, you got to know your folks, man.
Good deal. All right. Let's see here. We'll go with the kind of a simpler one. And this is probably difficult, but what is your favorite worship song currently, if you have one?
Oh, man, my favorite worship song. Boy, that's tough. I'm going to tell you. So this week on our podcast is a guy named John Egan is our guest, and John is the worship leader at New Life Church in Colorado Springs, and that's a church that has been through a lot, national news type stories, and so to have gone through everything they've gone through. And on John's new CD is a song called Nehemiah. And just the tagline is, "I'm not coming off this wall." And it's just a great, and he talks a little bit about it on the podcast this week about staying on mission and keep swinging the hammer. And I think, that means something for me, for the people who are listening to this. It might mean something different to them if they're not in full-time ministry, but man, that is a song that is rocking my world right now.
Well, and it seems like, and again, I don't know much about it, but it sounds like, it comes from such a place of just reality that it just relates so easily because of that situation. So,
absolutely.
All right. Let's see what else we got here. This is a good one. If you had the pick of whoever that you said you could pick whoever you wanted, what worship leader would you love to have on your podcast?
That is a great question. I tell you, we have been very, very blessed that even from the beginning, people took chances on us. Mm-hmm. Certainly, one of my worship leader heroes is Paul Balash,
that was pretty early on.
That was pretty early on, and he has written so many songs that are just gifts to the church that we get to lift up. Man, Paul Balash, we've had Meredith Andrews, Kim Walker-Smith, so many. I tell you, there are a couple that would be on my wish list. I'd love to interview David Crowder. I just think that would be an absolute kick because he is hilarious. I'd love to interview him.
And I think you've shared some of your memes, so you might have it in there a little bit.
Yeah, man, if he ever watches this, talk to us, man. I'd love to have him on. I would love to have, I'd love to talk to Chris Tomlin. I'd love to talk to Matt Maher, who is a Catholic worship leader, but man, has written songs like Your Grace Is Enough and just these incredible, incredible gifts. Those would be, I know I'm missing some, but those would be some of my wish lists.
Fun fact: I got to ask. I don't think you call it an interview because it was only one question, but I did get to question, or I'll call it an interview because it gives me a little bit. I did get to interview Chris Tomlin one time when I was a youth pastor, we had it was that extreme winter conference down in Tennessee. We took the youth group down there, and for whatever reason, the first how many ever people registered got to go to like a meet and greet. And for whatever reason, even 8 years ago, I just wanted to ask people questions. So on my personal YouTube channel, which no one will ever see, there's a video of me asking Chris Tomlin some questions. So that was interesting. But so yeah, I got me and him are like best buddies. I'll just send him your way.
Yeah, exactly. You're my hookup.
You had one person too. You had was Sandy Patty. And I don't know if half the people that are watching this even know who Sandy Patty is. But I'll tell you what, my mom would sing Sandy Patty songs every Sunday at church growing up. Like that's all we heard in the car was Sandy Patty.
And when I was in college, she was, this is somebody who when I was in college, she was doing international tours. Like she was touring Japan and playing arenas. Like there are very few Christian artists today who play arenas by themselves. And she was doing that, back when I was in college. And my wife, who is a vocalist, got to travel with Sandy as a backup singer for a few years. And so we've had a kind of a closer look behind the curtain with her, and she's the real deal, man. Those were great episodes. Like some of the stories that she shared on the podcast were unbelievable.
I bet she's got some interesting, before that we're sliding into the DMs, I'm sure she has some interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All I remember from my childhood is Sandy Patty and Carmen. That's all we played. Radically
Saved.
That's all it was. That and his movies. I don't even know what they were called, but I remember. All right. Here, let's go to a little bit more of a serious question that somebody sent in. And this is not to do with worship, really, but I'd love your input on it. How do people witness without being pushy or coming off as pushy?
Seemed like a theme. This is my perspective, man. Just authenticity, and it being an overflow. I also think I think it's so much better if it comes in the context of relationship. We're doing some stuff with that at our church right now, and encouraging our people to develop relationships, and not only fill your life with relationships with people who know the Lord, but being intentional about living in relationship with people who don't know the Lord, living out your faith in front of them, and not just beating them over the head. That's my...
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, just to build off that, I mean, I think you're absolutely correct. One of the gifts really that I think I've gotten is the whole time I've been in ministry, it's been bivocational. So I've always had to do ministry and something else. And that, for me personally, has been really helpful because, one, I don't have a choice. People know that I do ministry and I work somewhere. So, I mean, that naturally comes up anyway. But like you said, and I think I've talked, I don't know if it's been on a live before, but I know I've had conversations in the DMs with people about the fact that the longer you know somebody, the much more powerful your testimony is and your impact is and your conversations are, because it's one thing for me not to know you and come up and tell you about Jesus. It's something entirely different for us to have worked beside each other for 5 or 6 years and you see that worked out, right? So,
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I think you're right on point there because, I mean, yeah, it's going to come off pushy if we don't know each other that well and I'm trying to tell you. It's not impossible, I don't think, but it's so much more helpful, like you said, just to be you. And like you said, and I think it was Chewbacca Mom on her podcast that said it, but like you can't fake it. Like you just can't fake that. Like
absolutely. If it's over the long term, they're gonna see the cracks. And you know what? Sometimes that's probably helpful.
Yeah.
For them to see the cracks and to see how you navigate those. As a person of faith, as opposed to just this, this fake facade that everything is roses and rainbows and nothing ever goes wrong in my life, because that's certainly not the case.
Yeah. Well, and I think the most powerful like you're talking about seeing the cracks, I think the most powerful thing that we can do as Christians is be open and honest about that and have those conversations. So, I mean, just the other day, I was at work. I was with one of the customers I deal with on a weekly basis, and we were just talking randomly about our kids being born. Both of my kids were way premature. Doctor did not think they were going to make it. And just talking about our kids being born opened up this amazing door for me to say, hey, yeah, it was stressful, but there was just this trust, and there was just this this calm. And then I didn't even have to bring up Jesus. She said, well, why were you so calm? What do you mean? And then I was able to speak about that. It was just this really awesome, non-forced opportunity. That wasn't even my intention of having that conversation, but God was so gracious to open that door up. And like you said, just being really vulnerable with hey, this was a really difficult time, but let me tell you about my Jesus. So like you said, I mean, I think that's just, if we would embrace that a little bit more. And like you said, not try to be, perfect.
Yep. Everything's been perfect since the day I met Jesus.
Yeah, I don't think that speaks quite as well. All right. Well, this will be interesting because I have no dog in this fight at all. But most underrated instrument ever.
Instrument ever. I guess that could be any instrument.
Yeah. Whatever you feel is, we don't utilize the kazoo enough.
I love the cello. I love cello and I love French horn. Those kind of fall into a similar or pitch kind of zone in music. So like French horn and cello, those are just, when they're done well, I think those are two of the most beautiful instruments. Yeah, that'd be my triangle. Somebody said triangle.
Or the tambourine, right? I mean, gosh,
yeah, there you
we
go.
got to have
Tambo.
more tambourines.
Tambo.
Why would you not have the tambourine? All right. Let me see here. This is a really good question. I think this will be helpful to people. Have you ever been in a spiritual slump? And then I'll add to that, what did you do during that time?
Absolutely. I absolutely, have gone through, slumps or dark times or desert times or whatever you want to call it. Man, I think the thing that many people do is they abandon the things that get them out of that or get them through that. And so the only thing I know to do, man, is to draw near to the Lord, in the study of the Word and worship. And I think for me, a lot of times when that happens, I have allowed too many things to get into my life and to crowd out the really important things. And so, there are times where you just got to make some time, get alone with God, take your Bible. If you're a guitar player, which I'm not, I wish I was, but take your guitar, or take some worship music that's really speaking to you, get alone, go take a walk, go, get alone and really, really press through it and stay close to those things that feed your soul, the Word, worship, maybe get outside. I'm speaking to myself here. My wife is watching, and she will laugh probably when she hears this. But get outside. Get away from your phone, get away from your laptop or whatever, and go do something outside. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I mean, what you said earlier, and I feel like I've heard this on your podcast. I'm almost positive I heard this on your podcast, but I think you guys addressed it to where you have to even worship. I don't know, maybe it was Jeremy that said you have to worship in the worry or whatever. It was something along those lines.
Absolutely. But, a lot of times you have to, one of a song that I really love is a song by Matt Redman called Louder. And the pre-chorus says, and the greater the storm, the louder our song. Just keep getting after it,
And I think that's great advice, because what often happens, or what I've seen, at least patterns in my life and others people that I know's life, when that happens, our tendency or our want is to like draw back from that, because maybe you feel abandoned. So now you're backing up, you're not diving in, you're not pressing in because you don't feel it. When really, like you said, that's the best time to just, like you said, evaluate what you're letting in your life and then dive further in, despite your feeling of it, because it's not even really about that. It's probably something clogging that. So
yeah, absolutely. That's good.
It's great advice, because I mean, it's one of those things that I've seen people that say, well, I don't feel close to the Lord, and then they stop going to church or stop coming to small group or stop doing those activities, when that is the exact opposite of what, should happen during those times. So excellent. Let me see here if there's anything else. Yeah, here we go. What would be some recommendations on books, either worship books or just books that maybe you have really impacted your life that you would share with other people?
There's a great book out there called How to Worship a King. The author's name is not on the tip of my tongue right now, but just search How to Worship a King. That's a powerful book. The Heart of the Artist is a really old book by Rory Nolan, who was just at the helm way back when at Willow Creek, when their worship ministry was doing things we'd never seen before. The Heart of the Artist, that's a really good one. Soul Coma by one of the pastors who's on our podcast all the time, Scott Longyear. Soul Coma is another great how to kind of revitalize and reawaken your spiritual life. Those are some that jump out at me.
Good deal. Awesome. Yeah, I've seen you've posted about that last one a few times. I've seen that. I haven't had the opportunity to swipe up yet.
And he's a really good dude.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of wisdom.
Yeah, and that comes through too on that podcast. He'll shift that into wisdom gear real quick on you.
Yeah, he's a deep well.
Good deal. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left here. And I'm putting you on the spot here, so it might take a minute for you to think of this. But what would be maybe one of your best worst stories in ministry where you're like, I can't believe that happened, and you're not going to believe me if I told you?
In 26 years, there's one story that is kind of on the Everest of my ministry in terms of just royal botchings. Okay, so this was this would have been probably early 2000s, maybe like 99, 2000, right around in there. This was Good Friday service. And so we had worked really hard, and we were, there's a song, there used to be, I don't think they're still around, but there was a group called Acapella.
Okay.
Remember Acapella at all?
I don't think I do, but
all right. Well, shockingly, they were Acapella, no instruments. But they were, this was back like when I was in college and later. And so they had a song called Not My Will, which was just about, Jesus in the garden and that whole prayer, not my will, and going to the cross. And the song really takes you through the journey from the garden to the cross. Mm-hmm. And so we were going to play that song and act it out. And we had a guy who would play the role of Jesus, and we put him up on a cross and the whole bit. And it was powerful, man. You could hear a pin drop in our sanctuary when it was, and we worked so hard on it. So this was back before like MP3 files and all that stuff. So what I gave the acapella CD, I gave it to the sound guy. Mm-hmm. I didn't lift out the song that we were using for the crucifixion scene.
Yeah.
I just gave him the whole CD. And what I forgot to tell him was hit stop after that song ends. So like we had the whole thing going, man. It was loud. We had a whole crowd around
Spirits
Jesus.
Moving.
Exactly. He's on the cross. We've got like lightning happening and thunderstorms and all all kinds of stuff. And so Jesus dies, he drops his head. And then, as artists often do, like the next song is this like bebopping, like worship, really fast song. And so they leave that playing, and then they stop it. And then they play it again, and they stop it. And this happened 3 times.
The whole time, Jesus is
while
just
the Jesus
cross.
character, he's just hanging on the cross, you know? And it's like, what up, doobity-bop. I mean, it was that was a low point for me.
Everybody's in the audience going, is this supposed to be happening? Surely this isn't supposed to be happening. I don't know.
Oh,
what kind
yeah.
of church did we come to on Good Friday?
Exactly. Yeah, that was a fumble of the ball.
I bet that never happened again, though. Ever.
That is correct. We learned how to edit after that. Yeah.
Big mistakes always teach you that'll never happen again.
Oh man. Yeah.
You can see in your face the pain that brings.
It was bad. I have another one if you have to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Go for it, man.
Okay. So this was, again, this would have been probably like late 90s. I'm on staff at a church here in Indianapolis, a different church, and the senior pastor is going to be out of town, and so he asked the youth pastor to preach. And so the youth pastor, he was preaching on relationships and friendships, and he wanted to use this clip from the movie Forrest Gump, which, great movie, Tom Hanks, Forrest Gump. So
classic.
Classic movie. So there's this scene. Forrest and his friend Bubba are in Vietnam, and Lieutenant Dan, who is Gary Sinise, is this like foul-mouthed lieutenant, and he wanted the clip, the movie clip, and it was going to play during the middle of his sermon, and so he wanted it. It was this scene where Tom Hanks is Forrest is carrying Bubba, running out of the jungle with him. He's carrying him in his arms. Well, the problem is, right before that, Lieutenant Dan just goes on a profanity-laced rant. Okay, and so I was so paranoid. I tested it 1,000 times, and this was with a VHS tape.
Some of
you people watching, you may not even know what a VHS tape is, but it's not huge. A CD. It's like, it's huge. It's actual tape inside there. And what I didn't know is every time you put it in the VCR, it kind of it loads up a little bit differently. And so I tested it a bunch at home, and my wife was like, "Oh man, Brian, that is so
rolling the dice,
so close." Yeah, man. And so I went to church. I got there super early. I tested it a bunch of times, and so, yeah, man. So it got to that. I can't believe I'm telling it. So it got to that point in the service. The youth guy's preaching. He goes, "Hey, I want you to watch this clip," which perfectly illustrates what I'm talking about friendship. Roll it. And I had gone up into the tech booth just because my presence, just guarantees that nothing can go wrong.
Yes. It will not happen.
So they rolled the clip, and the very first thing in a service over the PA is Lieutenant Dan, swearing up a storm. This is in a service.
Oh my
and
goodness.
little kids who are asleep in the pews, their heads are shooting up all over the place. And, fortunately our congregation they all knew that we would not have done that on purpose. And it was a very unfortunate accident. And so,
oh my goodness.
And so it was, it was the Lord's name in vain was a part of it, and so I go down back, and our singles pastor is sitting in the back with his head against the wall, and he turns to me and he goes, "At least it wasn't the F word." It was close. So we go into staff meeting on Monday morning, and our senior pastor walks in and with this huge grin on his face, and he's like,
knows.
"So, anything interesting happened this weekend?" So, hey, the good part of it is I found a video editor in my congregation that I wasn't aware of.
Wasn't there? You go.
Yeah.
Again,
so he was more than happy to help after that.
It's like, hey, you know what, guys? I can make sure this never happens again. Oh my goodness, I would have left the booth went down and been like, just here's my letter. I'm sorry. Here's my resignation.
I'm out.
I got
I'm
nothing.
out.
I can't defend. I'm sorry. There's no way. There's no way I'm surviving
Oh,
this.
it was brutal, man. It was
Oh my
brutal.
gosh.
It was brutal.
That in some churches that I've been in, you just don't even, you just go out the door. You're fired.
I'm sure.